Everyone needs somewhere to call home. A place of sanctuary away from the outside world. So what happens when that haven is lost or destroyed?
It was like a volcano coming out of the toilet.
People don't knock people's homes down, just like that.
I feel trapped living here.
And when disasters threaten not just your home, but your whole way of life.
Everybody could have ended up down in that hole.
Coming up, houses at threat on a shrinking beach.
It was as if it was bubbling and it was just getting angrier and angrier. It was just as if you were in a horror movie.
Non-stop motorway traffic is driving one couple to distraction.
This is intruding into our lives, and you cannot get away from it.
And one man's refusal to leave his home leaves him stranded.
I'll be here till I go out down this path in a box.
A couple's dream home in an idyllic area they've spent more than 50 years in is just meters away from being swept into oblivion.
We do live in fear that something we've worked all our lives for will go into the sea.
Val and Bob's property is probably next in the firing line.
They have no idea of when their house could succumb to the powers of the sea.
If you live by the sea, you have your own duty of care to yourself to maintain your own safety. We don't have to provide that defence.
It was just as if you were in a horror movie.
Val and Bob moved to Pagham in West Sussex 50 years ago, having fallen in love with the area when they visited as newlyweds during the swinging 60s.
We were married in London, we came down and had our honeymoon here. This is what we planned, just take life slowly.
This is our dream home, really.
10 years ago, Bob, a builder, got the opportunity to build and design their own beachfront bungalow right on one of the best spots on the beach. It was a dream come true.
The kitchen area and dining area overlooks the sea. These windows will open wide so that in the summer we can sit and get all the breeze in.
Lovely.
We're very spoilt. We do realise how lucky we are to live in such a beautiful place.
It was like heaven, really. Having the beach as your garden and just being natural and just being away from all the hustle and bustle.
You get the expanse, and it's like living with a moving postcard because every single second is different.
It was quite unique, really. And of course, we've saved all our money to build this place, and we thought it was a nice nest egg for us in our retirement.
But their future plans are now in jeopardy as the beach has begun eroding, shrinking and bringing the sea ever closer to their front door.
The beach was out where the red pot is out there when we first came here in about 50 years ago. And then in 2004, the beach started to gradually recede. And then in 2014, it came to within sort of 8-9 metres of our house, which was very, very frightening.
Since we lose our life, I mean, basically we could be asleep and it comes and taking us away. That would be the ultimate thing that we'd be frightened of. It is that scary.
Val and Bob aren't the only ones concerned. Local resident Brian has been monitoring the shrinking beach with his flying camera so he can record its retreat. The beach is currently 18 metres deep and is eroding at a shocking rate of around 5 metres per year.
When I moved here, it was just a pure shingle beach, covered in flora and fauna, stretching out a good 50, 60, even possibly 80 metres from here, and beautiful. In the last 10 years, it suddenly changed completely, and this is what we've ended up with.
10 years ago, there was a change in beach and harbour management, which was to have a dramatic effect on the shoreline.
I've lived here 30 years, and over that time, the harbour mouth was maintained by the Rivers Authorities. And in 2004, that was all stopped.
When they stopped taking the shingle from off the Pagham harbour mouth, it coincided with putting these new breakwaters in, these big rock groins that are along here. And I think they decided that that would stabilise everything. But what it did, it created more of an eddy in by the harbour, in the currents there. This beach at the moment is definitely depleting.
With the beach shrinking, the Pagham Beach residents were slowly coming to terms with the fact that their houses were all at risk of crumbling into the sea. And then, as if things couldn't get much worse, an act of nature added to their misfortunes.
You had 4 tides in and out. With each tide, it got worse and worse. I've never seen or heard the sea like it. It was as if it was bubbling and it was just getting angrier and angrier. Absolutely unbelievable. So frightening, very, very frightening.
You buy your dream home overlooking a lovely river, expecting to enjoy your peace and tranquility, not to look out on a garden fully submerged in human excrement.
The smell was appalling.
Excrement, toilet paper, all over the driveway.
The whole garden smelled like one huge sewage farm.
The bits that were floating past were indescribable. There must have been about that much sludge that was just pure sewage. It was just this cocktail of disgustingness.
Retired finance officer Carol and IT analyst John McCart moved from Middlesex to Chertsey 21 years ago.
I wanted a bigger garden, and this was the house that we thought would be fine for the family, and it had everything that we wanted at the time.
The 40-foot garden overlooking the River Bourne was the real selling point.
Well, it was lovely. It is lovely when you see the swans and the ducks. We knew sometimes that the water did come up into the garden, but it doesn't look a very big river, and it looks quite quaint, really.
But within months of moving in, Carol and John discovered the tranquil riverside setting had its downside. Chertsey is on a floodplain, with the Thames to the north and the River Bourne to the south. Carol and John became increasingly worried that the river would burst its banks.
There are times when we don't like it at all.
When people see the River Bourne in the summer, they said, well, that's a little stream. How can that flood? After a few days' rain, in the winter, that little stream becomes a raging torrent.
This is the River Bourne at the end of the garden. This is where all the trouble starts. This is the culprit.
The area has always been known for flooding. 1947 saw the worst since records began. And more recently, in the early noughties, 130 properties in the area were submerged. But back then, Carol and John escaped the worst of it.
This is the bit of the garden where the floodwater appears first, isn't it? We get a puddle here and a puddle over there by the greenhouse.
Carol and John could cope with a few inches of water creeping in the garden, but nothing was going to prepare them for what happened next. 2 days before Christmas 2013, the River Bourne burst its banks again and swelled up through the ground. And this time, the river rushed up closer and closer towards Carol and John's home.
It was on, actually, over the steps and lapping on the doorstep on the 24th of December.
Carol and John were not just worried about themselves.
Sarah and Paul, with their little girl next door, were away for Christmas.
We had a phone call from Carol on the 23rd of December to say that the river had burst its banks and we had water in the garden.
Carol kept her neighbours regularly updated with news of the rising waters.
I used to phone Sarah, and standing here with the phone in my hand, I used to open the window and I used to take photographs and then send them through to her at her mother-in-law's.
By Christmas Day, the water level reached the house.
Initially, we weren't terribly concerned. It had done exactly the same thing the year before, but in a couple of days, it was as though someone had pulled a plug and the water had gone.
Of course, our little girl was looking at the pictures and saying, Mummy, we've got a swimming pool in our garden.
We came back to find the water still in the garden, and it didn't leave for another 9 weeks. That was the worst bit. It just went on for so long that it just didn't seem as though there was ever going to be an end to it. You couldn't see it, because even though the rain had stopped, the water just didn't go down.
But they were soon to be confronted by not just water, but the build-up of raw sewage, which called for emergency measures. You've made the big decision to retire to a beautiful villa in sunny Spain. So what happens when you face losing the life you've worked so hard to enjoy and your dream home is threatened with demolition?
To me, it's just against human rights. People don't knock people's homes down, just like that. I did feel as though I was losing my life. It was taking everything away. It was my home, my retirement home, my life.
Captain Ivor Pringle and wife Judy took early retirement 14 years ago and decided to make a move from Basingstoke to Spain.
After 30-odd years of military parachuting, you have a few knocks and bruises. Some of the specialists I've seen following surgery said it might be a good idea if I was to move to a warmer climate.
We came out here on holiday a couple of times, and I've always loved it out here. And we thought, well, no, we'll go to Spain.
The Pringles took their life savings of £250,000 and spent 3 months in Andalusia looking around for their dream home.
You know when you walk into a house and you love it, well, this is what happened. I walked into the house and I wanted it. I loved it instantly. And that was it, we bought it.
For a price of £165,000, Judy and Ivor had found a villa with plenty of potential.
As soon as we moved in, we started ripping out the kitchen, and we then added terracing, barbecue areas, all sorts of things.
We were gradually improving the house to make it our home, to make it how we wanted to live. Everything was really good and happy, and it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
The Pringles spent another £50,000 of their savings doing the house up and were blissfully happy there for 8 years. But then, in 2009, out of the blue, they received some shocking news. New urban planning laws had been brought in after the purchase of their house by their regional government, known as the Hunter, which said their house had been built without the correct planning permission.
The local police came to our house and gave me a letter, looked at the letter. My Spanish isn't fluent, but I could read enough Spanish to say that you now have months in which to demolish your house, or we will do it for you at a cost of €60,000.
It was a huge, huge shock. And then just burst in tears then. That was it, really. Because it was my home. All of a sudden, I felt unsafe. And to have somebody come along and say, we're going to knock your house down. What are we going to do then? We'd have a piece of land in Spain full of rubble. Where were we going to live? Because we hadn't any more money to go back to England to buy another house. Devastating time, that was. Devastating.
Being told they'd just 2 months to demolish their home left the Pringles reeling. They were determined to fight to save their house they thought they had purchased with the correct planning permission. They immediately sought legal advice and costs started to spiral out of control.
As soon as we had that letter, it just cost us money. It was 500 here, 90 euros there. Well, the solicitor was 5,000, was it?
It's over 6,000 we paid him.
And from that moment on, it was just money, money, money. And we were living on our pensions. What would we do? Where would we go? We looked into it and we couldn't even afford a caravan.
What was happening to Ivor and Judy was not an isolated case. Over 10,000 properties in the area had been classified as illegal by the regional government and were being threatened with demolition. Faced with the very real prospect of losing everything they invested in Spain, Judy and Ivor spent the next 2 months building up a strong legal case to battle to save their Spanish home.
We just wanted to get on with our life and enjoy Spain, but we weren't allowed to do this. I haven't felt safe for a long time.
Bob and Val Tomlinson had built their perfect pad on Pagham Beach with killer views of the sea.
This is what we planned for our retirement.
This is our dream home, really.
But their dream became a nightmare when they found out 5 years ago that the beach was shrinking at a staggering rate of around 5 metres a year. And then, in January 2014, things got a whole lot worse when seasonal high tides clashed with a ferocious storm, causing catastrophic damage to the sea defences. In one night alone, they lost 5 metres of beach.
I've never seen or heard the sea like it. It was as if it was bubbling and it was just getting angrier and angrier, and the wind was howling and the stones were coming up and they were hitting the windows. It didn't let up for 48 hours. So in that time you had 4 tides in and out, and with each tide it got worse and worse, and it was just so frightening.
You didn't know whether the roof was going to go or the walls were going to come in at you all of a sudden. Might have been abandoned house. You know, kept our clothes on all the time, so to speak, you know, ready to go.
After a 2-day assault, the storm finally blew itself out, and Val and Bob were able to take stock of the damage.
The morning after, we found the boats had moved down the beach and everything outside was just a mess, or we lost, you know, the bits and pieces around the house.
The sea came within 9 metres or even less of our house. We never ever thought that it would come down to this. We had a minimum of 3 to 4 football pitches in front of us before that night, but that night we lost maybe 5 metres of beach in one tide.
In the immediate aftermath of the storm, the local council brought in diggers to try to replace some of the shingle that was lost.
This is all reclaimed beach that they've actually piled up to this level. The sea was right here all the time, just a few months ago.
The council's view is that we're trying to do as much as we can with the budgets that we have. Personally, and from my job, I feel extremely concerned for the residents. They've got a lovely view, but that view is getting closer to them all the time.
We choose to live where we live. Up until recently, we never ever dreamt that something could happen and we could lose our home. So who could we go to?
Shouldn't the council protect us?
The district council has powers to undertake works, but we have no duties. We don't have to provide that defence. With the risk of living this close to the sea, you always feel for the property owners down here, and we do what we can for them.
The emergency measures of adding more shingle to the beach was helping, but there was still a lot more needed.
They've spent over £2 million since 2010, and it's worse than it was when they first started.
The harbour mouth used to come out just along there, that little gap of water you can see, that's where the harbour mouth used to exit, and our beach was out as far as there, so all our beach used to be right out here, all the way down. Our beach used to be out as far as that when the tide was in. The properties on the front are the ones mainly at risk at the moment. They are the sea wall for Pagham. Once it goes behind, you lose your electricity, you lose your sewage, so basically that's all of Pagham affected.
Enough was enough, and the residents decided to take action.
The people of Pagham are fighting tooth and nail to get something done.
It's the shore of England.
It is.
Let's save England, let's save our beach, let's save our land for everybody, not just us.
The fight was on to save Pagham Beach and the houses that were on it from falling into the sea. But there was more bad news to come.
It's very sad, actually, to tell them that they can't move and that their house has no value right now.
Retirees Ivor and Judy had been devastated by the news from the regional government in Spain, the Junta, that their Spanish home of 8 years had been built without the correct planning permission and was being threatened with demolition.
What right have they got to come and knock my home down? I was devastated. I couldn't stop crying for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Houses all around them were being pulled down, and the Pringles feared theirs would be the next in line.
Our lives were put on hold because we wanted more double glazing, we wanted more air conditioning, we wanted things to improve the house. But what's the point of spending money just for the house to be knocked down?
We just wanted to get on with our life and enjoy Spain and have a nice home and have a happy time. But we weren't allowed to do this. The house actually, as far as I was concerned, was owned by the Junta.
With their lives in turmoil, the Pringles were in limbo.
We had a phone call and one of the councillors said, you need to come to the town hall. We have some news for you about your house. And I thought, oh my God, what is it? So I went up to the town hall, and it would appear that the junta had been putting pressure on the town hall to carry out the court order to demolish our house. We knew nothing of this. Everything was done behind the scenes. We could have had a situation here where the first we knew about it was a JCB turning up at our front gate saying, we're here to knock your house down.
At first I was very, very upset to think that we were so close to demolition and we knew nothing about it.
Luckily for the Pringles, their home wasn't demolished, but they are living in a house over which they no longer have full control.
We have spoken to several estate agents, and a lot of them don't want to take our property on because of the situation that we're in. We certainly lost value in the property. Whatever the market value is of a legal property, ours would probably be at least a third less than that. And we know of properties that have gone for song just for people to get some money out of Spain and get back to the UK.
Phil Smalley from Save Our Homes Asarkia has been fighting to prevent British-owned homes from being demolished.
What we've been arguing for a long time is that with 300,000 illegal homes in Andalusia, the only solution is an amnesty. What are you going to do with 300,000 illegal homes? Are you going to knock them all down? Stupid.
The Pringles, like thousands of others, were fearful of losing their home. Then finally last year, there was good news. Their solicitor told them they had won their case. A Spanish judge had found in their favour and ruled that the demolition order to tear down their house be thrown out of court. Judy and Ivor were able to keep their dream house.
I thought, oh, we're safe, absolutely, it's fantastic. And it was like a great big cloud being lifted off my shoulders. I thought that was absolutely marvellous, absolutely wonderful.
What we've been through, I have to say, it's left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. I think it's wrong that we can be treated like that. But it is nice just to sort of chill out, look at the views and appreciate what you have got. Because one thing we are aware of, there are a lot of people in the world a lot worse off than we are. So in many senses, we got nothing to whinge or whine about. This happened to us, it shouldn't have done, but you have to crack on with life. And from that point of view, we make the best of what's going for us now. Simple as that, really.
Absolutely.
What would you do if the quiet road at the end of your house turned into this?
This is intruding into our lives, and you cannot get away from it.
With tens of thousands of cars and lorries whizzing past every single day.
Our house is just beyond those trees, and we can hear this in our bedroom, in our garden. It's intolerable.
The village of Upton St Leonards in Gloucestershire has been home to Kathy Barber for almost 4 decades. She moved there in the late 70s, and 10 years later, when she married David, it became his home too.
Beautiful. It's, people are very, very kind, and you feel you're part of the community. And yeah, it's a lovely place to be.
The children grew up here, and we've got our family history here. And yes, it is a very nice home to live in.
For green-fingered Kath, the garden was as much of a draw as the house itself.
The garden is my haven. I love doing my own plants, and I have done for many, many years. In fact, the first thing I did was made a vegetable patch at the bottom of the garden.
But the veg patch wasn't the only thing lurking on their boundary. Only metres away lay the M5 motorway. When Kath first moved in 1977, there were less than half the amount of cars on the road, so it wasn't considered a nuisance at all. But gradually, the traffic has spiralled out of control.
The motorway had just been built, and around that was open countryside still. The noise level was less, and I could hear the birds and things like that, and I felt it was really in the country.
But in recent years, the number of vehicles using the M5 has risen dramatically. Now, over 80,000 vehicles thunder past David and Kath's house every day, and they don't come quietly.
I've got a decibel meter in my hand, I'm told that a vacuum cleaner and a hairdryer measures about 70 decibels. We're getting readings 77, 78, that sort of level of sound. 84, 83. We've got some pretty high levels of noise in the garden here. A vacuum cleaner or a hairdryer is a fairly localised noise, and it's for a short period of time. You switch it off and the noise is gone. I only wish I could switch this off as easily as I could switch a vacuum cleaner off.
According to figures from the Royal National Institute of Blind People, constant noise above 80 decibels can damage hearing. And with levels peaking at around 84 in the garden, the Barbers can no longer enjoy spending time in it.
The garden really is unusable for social occasions. You have visitors, you take them out into the garden. It's impossible to just sit there in the quiet. There is no quiet.
You can't walk away from it. But I still say this is my home and I love my home.
People have said to me, well, if you live by a motorway, surely you expect to have some noise. Yeah, OK, that's fair enough. But there is noise and there is noise.
There are measures in place to try and dampen the sound reaching the Barbers' property.
We've got a 3-metre high wooden fence, which is supposed to act as a noise barrier. And then just the other side of that 3-metre fence is the motorway itself. And whilst we're standing quite close to that 3-metre fence, it does reduce the noise level. But then once you start to move away from the area, back further down the garden, you notice that the noise is coming more and more over the top of that 3-metre barrier.
But the noise isn't the only thing preying on Kath's mind.
The pollution comes in the form of black dust. You're having to constantly clean. It's there all the time. And you can see the level of dirt in there. It's filthy.
The Barbers' predicament is one David Hunt from the Parish Council is well aware of.
The people who live as close as Mr. and Mrs. Barber do here, they've got extra problems. They've got extra noise, of course, being very close to the motorway. They've got vibration problems from heavy lorries, and they've got general pollution, which can't be good for your health either.
David and Kath know they bought a house by a motorway, but with the massive increase in traffic levels, they want something to be done to improve the problems. So, they've joined forces with the Parish Council to lobby the Highways Agency for change.
The 3 things that they need to do, I feel, is to put a genuine low-noise surface on the motorway, vegetation on the embankment, which will give us air pollution screening to the houses, and thirdly, to put a noise barrier there, which is a noise-absorbing barrier, and not a simple wooden fence that bounces the noise around everywhere.
Highways England say they plan very soon to resurface this stretch of road with a low-noise surface, which they say will halve the noise from the road. But with no set start date, the Barbers are left in limbo.
All we can do is shut the windows or move, neither of which is really an acceptable solution to us. We're quite happy living here. The only problem that we have got is that motorway at the bottom of our garden.
The gardens of Carol and John McCart and neighbour Sarah Cousins are under 4 feet of water after some of the worst flooding this decade.
You're looking out and thinking, you've got 4 foot of water in your garden, but the fact that it might have gone down an inch is brilliant.
But after the water, there was something even more shocking.
It was just raw sewage pouring out.
Sarah Cousins and her family returned home from their Christmas holiday to be greeted by flooding in their garden like they'd never seen before.
The water in our garden initially started off as just straight river water, groundwater coming up, which is depressing but manageable.
Then, 2 weeks later, what was manageable was about to become unmanageable. They discovered something far more sinister seeping into their gardens.
It was just raw sewage.
The sewage pipes had burst, adding human excrement to the floodwaters.
That's the drain where it was coming out. So as a result of that, because it's quite flat here, we had it going in both directions.
The situation was even worse for neighbours Carol and John, as their property sits on land a few inches lower.
The smell was appalling.
Excrement, toilet paper was absolutely scattered all over the driveway.
The bits that were floating past were, well, indescribable. It was just disgusting. It was that deep with just sewage. Carol and John's was beyond disgusting, actually. Ours was pretty horrendous because it seemed to come and settle on the grass. But they had it in the outbuilding, they had it down the side, they had it at the front of the house, in the driveway, all the way down on their patio. I mean, they were covered, absolutely covered. Because the fence panel had come down in the wind, the two gardens kind of just merged into this one wet, smelly, sewage-ridden cocktail of disgustingness.
Carol and John contacted Thames Water, their local water board, but they were told no investigation could go ahead until the water levels had fallen.
A couple of days later, the water went down and they came and looked through everybody's drains with cameras to make sure there wasn't any blockages. They didn't know why the water wasn't filtering away as quick as it should.
Raw sewage continued to seep into Carol, John and Sarah's gardens, and 6 other houses on their street that backed onto the river were also affected.
You can imagine the stench. It was horrific.
To stop the water flooding even more homes, a 600-metre long flood defence was erected just metres in front of Carol, John and Sarah's houses. Locals gave it a nickname.
The Chertsey sausage. It was this giant inflatable, in fact it was full of water, a dam.
To help with the crisis, the army were called in.
We had the army boys here for about 4 weeks, shifting, moving sandbags. The Runnymede Centre around the corner became an army base. And every day, up and down the road, there were army lorries trundling. It was like a war zone.
Tankers were brought in by the authorities to pump away the water.
With tankers outside, it must have been costing a fortune. And then they decided they would shut the road.
With the main road shut, Thames Water could investigate further. It was to reveal something shocking. A massive ball of fat had accumulated, blocking the sewage pipe.
Once that was released, everything started to move again.
When the waters finally receded, there must have been about that much sludge left on the grass. That was just pure sewage. It wasn't mud, it wasn't silt, it was just sewage.
There was muck everywhere, and we looked down and there was a tiny little crocus that had grown through.
All that muck.
Everything around it, and it survived. And you know, that was a real good feeling, wasn't it?
It was.
It was lovely to see one little crocus.
The risk of it happening all over again is never far from their minds.
If we have a deluge of pouring rain and it lasts for a little while, the first thing we do is to go upstairs and look out the corner to see how high the river is. Yeah, it's always there.
The authorities say they have helped flood victims to secure grants to protect their homes from future flooding. And local pumping stations and sewer networks are being upgraded.
Anything they can give us to give us a bit more protection and a bit more peace of mind, we'll have it.
The residents of Pagham were battling time and tide to save their homes from the sea.
In January 14, it was just horrific. We was really at the point of abandoning the house. The spray and the stones hitting the glass windows with the boats sort of getting taken off. We thought they were going to smash into our house.
The beach where Val and Bob have their house is shrinking. And after losing a whopping 5 metres of ground almost overnight in a raging storm, the situation became critical.
We had a minimum of 3 to 4 football pitches in front of us before that night. It came within 9 metres or even less of our house. It's very frightening, and we never ever thought that it would come down to this. The
beach began eroding just over 10 years ago. due to a growing shingle bank redirecting water away from the harbour and towards the beach in front of Val and Bob's house.
On each sort of spring tide, which are 6 metre tides, we've lost some beach. I mean, it only takes a couple of bad storms.
And we'll be gone as well.
And we'll be gone as well.
Faced with the serious threat to their homes, the residents have joined forces with the parish council to try and come up with a lasting solution to the problem of the shrinking beach.
We are having a report done to determine what needs to be done to save Pagham from being flooded.
The independent report has been commissioned to look at all the options.
It's costing the parish council nearly £150,000 to get this report done.
But there is an added complication. Birds are nesting in the area, so wildlife needs to be protected too. Local estate agent Montana Whitlock, who's been working in the area for the past 25 years, has been advising residents how much to now expect for their properties.
If we were valuing this under normal circumstances where we didn't have this issue, I would be expecting to achieve around just shy of £600,000. But
yeah.
Right now, it's not about the price, it's about the confidence of buying along here. Now it's who's going to do what and when, and are we going to be safe? But what I would say is it's really just not the time for you to move, because
just try and hang in there.
So really, Montana, are you saying really it's worth nothing?
Yeah, it was just really very bad timing for you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's very sad, actually, to tell them that they can't move and that their house has no value right now.
I can't believe it. I really can't.
Until a permanent solution is found, Val and Bob's property is not only under threat, but is virtually worthless. So, the residents are now taking their recently commissioned report to the government for help.
The survey done by our consultants is on its way, I believe, to DEFRA for them to make their findings on it. Hopefully we'll get the sort of result we want, but it's a long way off.
For now, the future for Bob, Val and all their neighbours' homes remains uncertain.
We've just got to hope and pray that something can be done to save our home.
This was one of the best estates in the whole of the Northwest. We had everything we wanted, and now we've got nothing.
Birkenhead-born Charlie once lived in a thriving shipyard community of 600 homes.
This house means everything to me, as I was born in this house. All my family worked around here, lived around here on the estates, so I'll be here till I go out down this path like my mum did, in a box.
But around 15 years ago, the council proposed to demolish 300 of the houses around him.
It come to my attention that the council had intentions of pulling the estate down. The whole idea of pulling the houses down on this estate was regeneration.
The ex-council house Charlie bought is now the last inhabited house on this once busy residential street. The two houses either side have long been abandoned.
I thought they would do the honourable thing by bricking up each side properly, but they've left an empty house each side where they've got pigeons, rats and mice.
But Charlie has refused to leave.
They said to me, go and pick another council house, an empty one, and we'll do you a straight swap. I thought, why should I start all over again in one of their empty council houses? No way, Jose. Once we started pulling them down, it then really hit you what's happening in the area. When people started moving, to me, it was upsetting because I'd known them all my life. And it was sad to see them go. It was really sad. It only really hit you when you was on your own. So you sit watching the telly on your own and it really gets you.
Now, after over 60 years in his family home, he has no neighbours and no community life. He's living in a no man's land.
Through the years, we've been wondering what's going to happen with the land where the houses was. And year after year, nothing happens. So we're wondering, well, why did they pull them down then? I'd love to see something put on there, or put either side of me here, rather than leave it to be a flight tip area. It's unbelievable, unbelievable.
Finally, after over 10 years of relative inactivity, there are signs of regeneration with an £8 million construction project at the old dockyards.
This is the future of Birkenhead. It's going to be one of the biggest trade centres for the whole country. This is one of the best things what's ever happened here. For the next 30 years, it's going to be build, 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 build.
But despite the proposed regeneration, Charlie has no plans to move.
It's funny, when you've lived in a house all your life, it's not just like 4 walls, it's like you feel safe, and in this house I feel comfortable, and I still feel like my family is still around me in here, my mum and everyone. That's how I feel in here. And while I'm here, they're here. Once I go, they've all gone. So that's why I'm staying put.
Wirral Council say it's Mr. Wright's decision to remain living where he is. They have offered him alternative accommodation when they sought to buy his property, but he has told the council he doesn't want to move. They say if Mr. Wright changes his mind, they will be happy to talk to him to explore options for rehousing.